Good evening, guys. My name is Crystal Miller. I'm a Senior Research Associate here at Statistics Solutions, and I will be doing the webinar this evening. Thank you so much for taking the time to attend. So tonight we will be talking about addressing feedback, getting through quickly and efficiently. Okay, so the easiest thing to do at first is to go over each comment. So take time to read through each and every comment before you start addressing any, because you may find that some of the comments are really similar to each other or changes need to be made throughout. And you don't want to be addressing feedback and find that, through your edits, the comment disappears and then it applies someplace else. So read it in its entirety, take notes if necessary, work on a different copy so you don't lose comments, and reach out to your chair with any questions that you may have. Also, you want to stay organized. Organization is key when addressing feedback. You're going to want to save old drafts of your dissertation just in case you find that something that you deleted previously you need again, so you don't have to, reinvent the wheel. You can just pull it out of an old version and maybe edit it to make it apply to the new one. There we go. Sorry about that. So reaching out with questions. It's okay to ask questions. A lot of students are really hesitant to reach out to their chair with questions. They're afraid that they're going to come off as stupid or anything like that. It's definitely not stupid. Just like how easy it is to misinterpret something over email or text message, it's just as easy to misinterpret something that you've received in feedback in your document. So if you have any questions or if you're confused or anything like that, just reach out to your chair. They're there to help you. So, and you cannot thoroughly answer something if you don't understand it. And as I already mentioned, part of your chair's job is to guide you through the editing process. They shouldn't mind if you ask a few questions. Just make sure that you have all of your questions together so you can ask them all in one shot instead of spending a week back and forth emailing or playing phone tag or something like that. If it's something that you feel more comfortable talking about, reach out and see if you can schedule a conference call with them or something to get them live so you can, limit a lot of the back and forth by asking them to elaborate on something right away. And be clear about what you do not understand. Don't just be like, well, I don't get it. Perhaps it would be best if you came in saying, okay, so here you said that this paragraph is unclear. Is it unclear because of the language, or do you think I have too many topics going on? Maybe I should spread this out. Kind of brainstorm a little bit on what the comments might mean before you reach out. Offering some ideas is going to show that you're prepared and that you did put some time in and that you're not just trying to cut corners by saying, well, I don't get this, explain it to me. And as I said before, chairs aren't going to get upset. And if they do, honestly, that's too bad. It's part of their job. They're there to help you. So utilize them. You're paying so much money for that. So back to understanding your feedback. I'm going to mention this probably 100 times tonight because it is really the most important part of being able to effectively and thoroughly address feedback is understanding it. Once you feel that you do have a solid grasp on the feedback, address it as thoroughly as possible. Even if you get to the point where you're like, oh no, maybe I'm putting too much in. Well, it's a lot better for them to come back and say, this is great, just cut it back, or you only need part of this. It's much better for that than for them just to come back and say, well, you didn't address the feedback. I still want to know about this. I need to know more about this. You didn't include enough details. Include as many details as possible. Think of every possible way that you might need to address feedback and include all of those things. Your chair can look them over and see what they think about it, and then you can cut back as necessary. when editing, it's much easier to cut back than it is to add. And don't force your chair to ask for the same changes multiple times. If you are including everything possible when you're addressing feedback, you're not likely going to get additional feedback saying that you didn't address the original feedback. So make sure that you can put in everything possible. You don't want to leave anything to chance. You don't want to leave them asking any questions or anything like that. You want to provide as much as possible to show that you've done your due diligence in working to address each and every comment. Pushing back on feedback. This is scary, but sometimes very necessary. I hate to say this, but sometimes you will find chairs or committee members, maybe it's the end of the day, maybe they just have a really heavy load going on, and maybe they skimmed over something, and then they got to something else that was confusing, so they made a comment that to you seems kind of arbitrary. Or you've been doing a qualitative study, and they suggest moving to quantitative. Reaching out to them and talking to them about things, say, you know, just justify your reasoning. And most of the time they're going to agree with you. Occasionally they may not, and you may have to change things, but just make sure that you know why you wrote everything, why it's included, and why you've chosen to do things the way that you have. Because if you can push back on something that seems irrelevant, it's just going to show that you're more prepared, particularly when it comes time for defense. And that's going to make your chair feel a lot more confident about your abilities. Also remember, it's your dissertation. Don't let the feedback drive you into a place where you either do not understand or that you feel uncomfortable defending. You know, perhaps you're doing a study on surviving cancer patients or something like that, and they decide, you know, first if you've gotten through URR and they're allowing you to do IRB and URR, and they're allowing you to do that vulnerable population, and then someone comes back and says, well, maybe you should do the spouses of these people instead. You know, make sure that you're sticking to your guns. Be confident in your study. You are an expert in the field. Sometimes your chair or your reviewer is not. So just, you know, embrace your confidence and your expertise and, you know, let your chair know that you're harnessing that. Sometimes when you have to push on feedback, it's often due to a lack of clarity in the verbiage used in the document or in the feedback. So sometimes you'll find that if you need to push back on something, it was more because they made a comment because what you said in the paper maybe wasn't what you meant, you know, the words didn't align, or you misunderstood the feedback because they weren't clear. Again, goes back to asking questions. It's super important to understand what's expected of you. Keep an open and professional dialogue with your committee. There is absolutely nothing worse than getting super defensive about something and lashing out at your committee, because then you are not going to leave a very good taste in their mouth, and they're going to remember that the next time that your paper comes across their desk. So if you need to sleep on it before you reach out about something or push back on something, it might be necessary. Just make sure that, you know, you stay calm, cool, and collected and professional, and your conversations with your committee will be very fruitful. You'll find that when you need to get things done, it's very necessary for details to be had or expounded upon. These things will happen if you stay open and professional. Incongruent feedback. Sometimes this happens. Sometimes you'll find that your chair and committee member or one of your committee members versus another committee member are at odds regarding the changes that they think should be done. So the feedback that you're getting will be, you know, almost like a rebuttal of them to each other. This is where you need to talk to your chair. Your chair is your advocate. They are your first and your last line of defense against the committee. You can talk to your chair talk about which feedback you think is most fruitful for your particular study, and your chair then needs to deal with the committee at that point. It's not really your place to reach over your chair's head to, reach out to any of those committee members to say, hey, I see that you don't agree with so-and-so, and I agree with you, or anything like that. It's necessary to go through your chair, make sure you follow the chain of command, and they can help you with this stuff. So be sure to utilize your chair and their guidance and their resources wisely. Indicating changes. Now, some chairs have very specific ways that they want you to indicate how you've done your changes, and they'll be very clear about it. They'll provide you with a change matrix, format or something like that, or they'll tell you to use track changes, or they'll tell you to highlight things. Some chairs won't. They'll just give you feedback and leave you in the air. So just make sure that you find some organized way to show that you've done feedback if you don't have clear guidance on how to indicate as much. So you can use track changes, which sometimes look a little messy and scary to people who aren't familiar with them. Track changes can always be undone. They can be accepted. They can be declined. They can be hidden. They can be exposed. Track changes are very useful. It does take a little bit to get used to them. There are a lot of really wonderful, useful YouTube videos on how to use track changes. Some chairs are a little more old-fashioned. They just want you to write it in regular text and just highlight it so they can quickly scan through the document, stop at highlighted sections, read them, compare them to the comment, and then let you know if they feel like you addressed it thoroughly or not. Or there is the dreaded change matrix. A change matrix is not hard. It's just really time-consuming. And it's most important to stay on top of a change matrix while you're making changes, because then you can literally just copy and paste the comments from the document and the old text and the new text, and then write a quick sentence or two on why you made the change or how you made the change. Usually it's something as simple as saying, changed verbiage for clarity, or adjusted sample size to align with whatever, or first line of purpose statement changed to align with research question and problem statement. They're usually really easy explanations, so don't overthink those. Use the resources that are available to you. You have librarians at your school, whether you need to reach out to them via email or you actually have a physical library that you can pop into and someone can take the time to work with you. That's part of your tuition. You pay for library services, so make sure that you're utilizing everything that is available to you. A lot of schools also have peers, or even if you have if you've made friends in your class or something, it never hurts to get a second set of eyes on your paper. Even if you have your mom or your daughter or your next door neighbor read something, that might even be more useful, because if they aren't experts in your field, they can point out places where they're like, oh, okay, so you had me up until here, and then I got a little confused because maybe you got a little too technical in your terminology, or you left something out. It happens. And then there are always editing services, such as the services that we provide. Most chairs will also suggest that you hire an APA editor. That's very important. However, it is also very important to keep in mind the fact that APA editors do not edit content. They only edit for APA rules. And if there are any content changes that need to be done, they will usually just leave you verbal feedback. And be timely. Think about how long this process takes. Think about how long you've been in this process. And think about the time that it's going to take for you to address feedback diligently. If you just have little nitpicky feedback, like maybe they don't like the way you use this one word, or you have too many that's in the document, or these or its, or something like that, those are going to be quick, easy changes that you can turn around, in just a day or two. However, if they're asking you to rehash your lit review or to update all your sources because maybe you took a break and everything's too old now, make sure that you're setting realistic timelines for yourself and that you're setting aside enough time to address this feedback. It takes a long time. Think about how long it took you to write each one of these chapters. Sometimes it's going to take you just as long to address really in-depth feedback, depending upon how much of a change it's going to make to the document. You guys are mostly all working adults with families and jobs and stuff like that, so just be mindful of everything that you have to do and things that you may also need to get done on your paper to address feedback. Set aside the appropriate time. Talk to your chair about a deadline on when they can expect the document back so that it holds you to that timeline, because if it takes you a week to address feedback and then it takes them 2 weeks to review it and turn it back around to you, you've got 3 weeks down. That's almost half of a semester. So just be mindful of how long it's taking things to happen. And you don't want to get stuck, making those unreasonable decisions on a deadline or not being able to make revisions and make one last submission before the end of a semester. So time is money. Nobody knows that more than you guys. So we expect quite a bit of questions and answers in this one. Feel free to ask any questions that you may have. If they're super specific, we may need to get back to you, but our goal is to answer as many as possible that you may have. So we had a question come in early this afternoon in preparation from Mark. And Mark asked, how do you determine if a journal is peer-reviewed? And he asked specifically about law journals. So, one of the easiest ways to make sure that you're using peer-reviewed journals and articles is to click the peer-reviewed box under Advanced Search when you're searching through your library, or you can go to the website of the journal itself. So the example that I'm using tonight is from the Harvard Law Review, and if you click on the About tab from their homepage, in the second paragraph it says, the review publishes articles by professors, judges, and practitioners and solicits reviews of important recent books from recognized experts. All articles, even those by the most respected authorities, are subjected to a rigorous editorial process designed to sharpen and strengthen substance and tone. That is most definitely a peer-reviewed journal. It goes through a rigorous editorial process. Their stuff comes from professionals in the field. You'll also be able to see that in peer-reviewed journals, it will include some sort of identification with each of the authors. Maybe it'll tell you what school they work for or where they got their degrees and stuff like that. There's some sort of background justifying their level of professionalism. All right, the next question that we have is from Andy B. How do you address feedback that is obsolete? My study changed focus and design drastically, and when I next went to QRM, I was accused of ignoring previous feedback that no longer applied to me or to the new topic. That's extremely frustrating, Andy. Sorry that you had to deal with that. This is a moment where your chair advocating for you is important, because you could try to defend yourself until you're blue in the face, whereas your chair could just write a simple short email saying, feedback, comments 1, 4, 7, and 10 no longer apply due to a change in focus. Or you can even indicate as much in a change matrix. If you have a change matrix that you had to supply with your changes, just put the comment down where you would put the revised text, you would put NA, and then under your justification tab, you could simply just put some verbiage in there that says something along the lines of, due to the change in focus from such and such to such and such, this feedback no longer applies to the content, or content was removed, is a very simple way to also address that. Then they can at least see that the content no longer exists, that the comment was regarding, so they can just move on. So Raimundo asks, when feedback is already addressed, how come there is another set of feedback that needs to be addressed? This is becoming a cycle, which is very disappointing and frustrating. Unfortunately, this does happen, where you'll have a reviewer go through, they'll make a round of feedback, you work really hard, you address the feedback, you send it back in thinking that you're good to go and you're going to be able to move on to the next committee member or the next step, and then they come back with a brand new round of feedback. Unfortunately, there isn't too much that you can do about it. Some chairs, that's just the way that they work, where until they are able to get over some of the issues that they see, they can't see other issues, or sometimes issues will arise in the editing process. The easiest way to cut back on that cycle is to sit down with your reviewer or have a call with them or something, and just express to them that you're concerned about time and you really want to make sure that you're getting thorough reviews so that you can be providing thorough revisions, and hopefully it puts them on the same page as you. All right, so Mark asks, what happens when you are in pre-comp, 2 classes out, and they will not respond to anything other than feedback as a response? I'm not sure what you're asking here. It seems as if you may have been reaching out asking for clarification and they just want you to address feedback. I guess the only thing that you can really do is reach out to your resources at this point, maybe access your writing center or your librarian or something like that, see if they can offer you any insight on what that might mean, on what the feedback might mean, and then you can, to make your best attempt at addressing it accordingly. Other than that, send your emails as high importance, reach out to your academic advisor, just keep trying. I know that's probably not the answer you're looking for. Andy asks, when we receive feedback that is not valid, such as grammatical or spelling error that is not truly a mistake, how do we go about getting a second opinion from another QRM reviewer? You do not get a second opinion from another QRM reviewer. They will consider that as rude and going over their head. What I would do personally is, if the sentence is getting flagged for a grammatical error, even if the grammatical error does not exist, just reword the sentence. There's 100 different ways that you can say every sentence. Just reword the sentence so that they can at least see that you made some sort of change for clarity. The only other thing that you can do is you can cite either the APA handbook or resources such as Purdue OWL or, Writing Center experts and stuff like that. But that may be received poorly by some people. It just depends on your chair. Some of them will read it again and realize that maybe they read it too fast and they made a mistake, but some of them may be offended. So I would tread a little lightly as far as that. It does happen, though, where they do make comments saying that something is grammatically incorrect when it's not. I really think that the best advice there is just to reword the sentence completely so that it, maybe it just didn't read clearly to them. Okay, so this question is, I have successfully defended my dissertation to the committee. I was given verbal recommendations during the defense and made those modifications to the document in red type. I am planning to, as I understand it from the committee during the defense. I must submit the document to the grad school for editing. My question is, does the graduate school provide additional editing that the committee has not? That depends. So most of the time after you've successfully defended or right before you successfully defend, your paper will go to form and style. Form and style are really like the end-all, be-all of the nitpicky things in the document, and sometimes they do offer a level of editing that you will not have received from your committee. But again, here I would utilize your resources. You know, send that stuff out to the Writing Center, find a peer who you really, know does really well, or retain an APA editor just to make sure that nothing else is going to get kicked back and your final approval isn't going to be delayed. Adrienne asks, would it be a good idea to identify and synthesize the major themes from the tons of comments received and then share an outline with my advisor as to how I'm planning to address them? Well, I suppose that depends on how long it's going to take you to put this together, because it may be just as easy just to go ahead and address it and then send it to your advisor and see what they think. It really depends more on your relationship with your advisor, your chair, and I would just shoot them a quick email and ask. Ask them if they would like to see something like that. Honestly, if you're going to take the time to put something like this together, I would just put together a change matrix and just go ahead and make all of the changes. Use track changes. So if they don't like any of the changes, you can just reject the changes that you've made and go back and change it again based on whatever kind of feedback you get from the edit. But otherwise, it doesn't really help to synthesize things a lot, because they're going to want to see that you're not just thinking about the feedback overall. They want to see that you're thinking about the feedback on every single line of every single page of every single chapter, especially if you received a lot of feedback. So I think the change matrix would probably be your best bet. But if you're unsure, just shoot your advisor an email and ask them if they think that it would be a good idea for you to propose that to them before you actually make the changes. All right, so I have had QR reviewers send me feedback that has already been addressed in the copy I submitted, such as see page 18, line 31. What recourse do we have for the quality or lack thereof of the feedback, and that the reviewer is apparently not reading the content about which he is providing comments? This is something that you're going to need to talk to your chair about. They'll be able to go through and see, what's happening. It's very possible that, as I said before, maybe they were rushing through your document or something like that. But it is also possible that if you addressed that feedback, maybe it wasn't addressed thoroughly and you still have a couple of details to hash out in there. So maybe just go back and revisit the changes that you made and see if there are any ways that you could make it more clear or more specific or something like that. And then I would push back on the feedback and make sure that you can indicate where each and every change shows up that they're referring to. So Stephen asks, what to do when a member questions part of your statistical model and all others, including the chair, agree with you? Well, it depends on if this person is your methodologist. If this person is your methodologist, you may need to sincerely and seriously consider changing your statistical model, because your methodologist may know something about that your other committee members do not. Remember that your methodologist is your methods expert, and maybe they're foreseeing some huge issue that you may run across while collecting data or some ethical problems or something like that that are going to be a bigger problem for you later on. However, if they're just someone who seems to be disagreeing for the sake of disagreeing, then you need to talk to your chair about it. And they need to become your advocate at this point and reach out directly to that committee member and justify your use of that statistical model. However, do be prepared to provide a reasoning for justification to your chair so that they can pass it on to that person. All right, so what if the time that they allotted for turnaround has passed? I've notified all the right people, including the chair, and I find out that the reviewer already returned it to the chair about 10 days prior. What if this was the nth time this has happened? Well, unfortunately, it sounds like your chair is not very organized. And so this opens up a whole new can of worms. You can either set weekly reminders for yourself to follow up with your chair to see if they have received feedback, or you can set weekly reminders to follow up with the person who's reviewing you so that as soon as they tell you that they have returned it to your chair, you can badger your chair until the end of time until they send you your document. Or you can reach out to your academic advisor, or if you feel like this is really, really an issue, you can reach out to the head of your department, the program director. And sometimes what they'll do is they'll audit your particular class and see that turnaround times are being met, and if communication is staying open and stuff like that. And sometimes just the worry of that will really kick a chair into gear so that they won't drop the ball like that anymore. However, other times the program director or whoever does the audit may not see an issue. It just depends. I would just try to be as diligent as possible and stay on top of things as much as you can. Super frustrating, but really being proactive and, setting things in your calendar or something like that for the day that things are supposed to come back and following up with everyone possible. You may find it most useful that if you are emailing your reviewer who would have sent your stuff back to your chair, CC your chair on that so that perhaps the reviewer can reply all and your chair will see that, hey, I dropped the ball on this, and it'll keep you more at the forefront of their mind. Other than those few options, there really isn't too much that you can do besides get a new chair, and that is a whole issue in and of itself, and I would not recommend it unless it is absolutely your last option, because sometimes it means you have to start all over again. All right, the next question that we have is, so normally if one successfully defends the dissertation to the committee and no additional comments, suggestions, or modifications are given during the defense, as all the committee members had the draft document but provided no questions, suggestions, or feedback during the defense, can or does the committee still have the ability to request additional modifications or feedback? Normally after your defense, if they don't have any feedback or modifications to request, they're never going to look at that thing again, except for to sign it. The only people who may look at it and tell you that you need to make modifications or feedback is form and style review if it hasn't gone through them yet. Or you may need to make just the last pass over things before it goes to ProQuest for publication. So it really depends on your school and their policy. Is there a standard change matrix template we could refer to? Some chairs have them already put together, but if you're not sure at all, I would just Google it. They all pretty much look the same. When you look at them, it's It's just a table with 3 or 4 columns in a row for each piece of feedback, and the first section is the comment. The first column will be for comments. The second column will be for the content. So you'll have a section for original content and revised content. And then the third column will be why or how you addressed it. And then the fourth column is just a page number. So the next question is, I have been in constant contact with my chair, and we have together been trying since 2013 to get my proposal through QRM, with 6 topic changes and often feedback that even the committee does not understand or agree with. We've been all the way to the Dean of Research with appeals and requests for clarification to no avail. Recently, the school terminated my chair and committee. I guess my first question there would be, have you gotten a new committee yet? And I would be less concerned with the process that you've gone through and more concerned with the fact that your entire committee was let go. This may be a blessing in disguise. Choose a new committee. Make sure that you do a good job at researching the people who are going to be in there. Choose committee members that you're familiar with, if at all possible. Ask around some of your peers, see who they have, see if you can reach out to some of those people and get them on your committee. But it's very possible that, you ran in circles all these years with this committee because they weren't qualified. And I know that that's really, really upsetting. And I would definitely reach out to your program director and talk about what your options might be for the wasted time. But, I would just get that new committee and start fresh. Dig up everything that you've had previously up until now, any of your old topics, any of your old drafts and stuff like that, so that you can really sit down with your new chair when you get one and talk to them about all of the wasted time and how you're eager to move forward and get things done, and what they suggest happens to make sure that you can get through. Okay, so Andy's additional concern is the new committee is qualified, but they don't think that the QRM is very qualified. This is something that's really out of your hands. Your committee is going to need to handle this, and I would sit down with as many members of your committee as you can and get their honest insight on it and an action plan. Put something together so that you guys can figure out, a plan to get through this. The biggest problem with this is that the QRM must be qualified to a certain extent, because if they're not qualified at all, it's not only you that's dealing with this issue, it's going to be every single other person that's coming across their plate. So if you're stuck with one QRM reviewer, your committee may be able to get your stuff in front of a different QRM reviewer, which may essentially really just be what you need. All right, guys. So I think that is the end of the questions. So we have another webinar coming up, Quantitative Results, How to Generate in Seconds. Janine Glace will be doing that. It is Wednesday, September 14th at 7:30 Eastern Time. She's going to walk you through the simple steps of using Intellect's statistics to generate your Chapter 4 in just a few seconds. So Janine is fantastic. She is our VP of Consulting. Many of you may have spoken to her on the phone. But thanks so much for joining us tonight, and do remember that you can always access our previous webinars on our website. And we do have a fantastic toolbox for those of you who want to sign up through the website. There are some free resources on there for you. So thanks so much for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.